answer questions and to present what we think is an accurate picture of where we are now and also where we need to go. So without further ado, I'm going to start with Reverend Gray. Reverend Darrell Gray is the president of the Detention Facilities Oversight Board, and he's had a contentious tenure since he came on, it's been, I'm sure, a rocky ride, but he's been pretty consistent. Next to him is Alderperson Rasheem Aldridge, and Rasheem has been very active in shaping Board Bill 93, which really stepped off of the work that had been done by Alderperson Shameen before him. And interesting, just watching Rasheem in action, you see that he's bringing the skills that he acquired at the state level into the Board of Alderpersons. So he hasn't really missed a step. Certainly last but not least is Ruby Bonner. She's no stranger to city government, to law. She brings both of those credentials, and she currently now is the interim Oversight Director, which also has been a little rocky, but they're looking for somebody, y'all. And one of the persons that's put their hat in that ring is none other than Louisa Lyles. And we have made it clear that since Ruby is not interested in that position, we would certainly like to see Louisa. That's the position of the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression. So we're not trying to hide that. We've told the mayor, we told everybody. This person has been in our office almost since day one. And so she knows the ropes, she knows what's supposed to go on. And so that's who we really think would make a positive contribution to getting the office back and running the way that it should be. So we're going to start with Reverend Gray. Give us a few statements about where we are, where the board is, and why you think it's been so contentious, and what have you and the board been doing?
That's a whole lot. Please excuse my voice. I just came back from out of the country, and I've probably gone through 3 climate changes. And so my voice is as it is, which means I won't be talking a lot as a preacher. Contentious, I think, is an understatement when it comes to the Detention Facility Oversight Board. The board came out of the 96 recommendations that were made from the Corrections Task Force that was established by former Mayor Lyda Cruson. I am the one who wrote provided the initial language for the DFOB to the previous Board of Alderpeople. I did the research. I served on the Corrections Task Force, and I served as chair. And coming out of those 86 recommendations, the establishment of an oversight board was the #1 recommendation. We did the research, we made the recommendation, and then we followed through with the recommendation with then Alderman Joe Vaccaro and Jeffrey Boyd. We did it in collaboration with the Public Safety Committee that Chairman Vaccaro was over. We did it in consultation with the mayor, and we had community input, obviously from CAPCAR and other organizations, as well as we moved through the process of creating the first ordinance that was ushered in by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. I was asked by the Public Safety Committee to serve on the DFOB. I willingly accepted because my work in criminal justice reform and prison reform, it didn't start yesterday. It didn't start with the task force. I've been doing this work for almost 4 decades and felt the urgency, like many of you here, that there be some oversight in the Justice Center. The contentious, as I said, is an understatement. From day one, the obstruction, particularly from the city councilor's office, was very real. They were involved in the ordinance creation. They made it very clear that this ordinance, that they would not allow the ordinance that created the DFOB to cause any legal problems for this city. We understood that. We understood that the job of the city councilor is to protect the city. What we did not understand, and what we pushed back on as much as we could, was city councilor's office having so much authority within this ordinance. And even as we moved through, most of the obstruction came by way of that department. We said at the very beginning that this was nothing, independent was not even the word. They threw that word out from the beginning. This was never intended to be an independent review board, never. And part of the problem, and it still exists, and it's a problem I think that exists because of restrictions of the charter, is that the city council's office is the legal representative for any government entity. This board is a government entity. And so you have a conflict of interest whereby the city councilor is the attorney for the city, the attorney for the Justice Center, the attorney for the Department of Public Safety, and for the DFOB. And so when you have one lawyer for all four entities, and our job is to provide oversight, well, naturally, there's a natural conflict of interest. And the other problem is that the Commissioner for Corrections has placed herself in an adversarial role from day one. We had an opportunity to meet with the Commissioner for Corrections, probably our second or third meeting, maybe even the first or second meeting going in. It was obvious from that meeting that we were not going to get a whole lot of cooperation from the Commissioner. And we saw that by her lack of communication with us. And when we had any communication, it normally was by way of a lawyer's letter. My lawyer has advised me not to say this, that, and the other thing. It didn't do us any good, obviously, because our role is to receive information, to review information, and to make recommendations based upon that information. But with a lack of information, it's hard to do our jobs. We fought tooth and nail for the last 18 months, and just pretty recently got some movement in the staff of the DFOB, and I know that the Deputy Commissioner will be able to talk more about that, or maybe not, because of the position of the Deputy Commissioner. The DFOB staff serves under the Department of Public Safety. Again, very glaring conflict of interest. You can't serve two masters, for lack of a better term. This DFOB staff has been doing a tremendous job with the restrictions that it's had. But if the DFOB staff cannot support the DFOB, draw your own conclusions. We fought tooth and nail to get access to the CJC, get access to information, get access to correctional officers, detainees, administrative staff, medical staff. I call them our staff. I call it the DFOB staff with great respect. But again, the roadblocks that we continue to get. And I think the biggest one is the idea of interference. We understand the interference clause in the ordinance. We understand that there are any investigations pending that DFOB staff cannot seek information or regarding those cases. What we found, it just seems as though every time there's a death and there's supposedly an investigation that stops us. But what we've maintained on the board is that the deaths are not the only things that we wish to investigate. There are a lot of other complaints that come out of the CJC. But again, not being able to get into the building, not having access to virtually anything has caused a major problem. We've lost 3 board members as of today. We had a board member, I think, that resigned yesterday, the day before, and one resigned today. We had one resign a couple of months ago. That board member that resigned a couple of months ago hasn't been replaced. And so that's just, I think, the tip of the iceberg as it relates to where we are. I've held steadfast because of the over 750 detainees that are in the Justice Center today. I've held fast because of the urgency that I felt 18 months ago, 2 years ago. It has not subsided at all. And we have made progress. I believe if the DFOB did not exist, we may not be having this discussion today. I know CapCar would probably make sure we were, but I like to believe that because we've existed, because we continue to speak truth to power, we continue to say what we believe is happening or not happening. We continue to challenge this administration and the staff. We continue to do that, and we will continue to do that. I have a 3-year term, and I intend to finish my term and do the best that I can with what we have to work with. And just finally, I think that the amendments to the ordinance are going to help us tremendously. And the support that we have received from President Megan Green, from Alderman Aldridge and Alderwoman Sonnier, and others. And so I'll stop there and be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
So thank you, because I think Reverend Gray hit on a number of issues that I think get lost, and that is CapCar introduced legislation for an independent civilian oversight board almost 15 years ago, maybe 20. And it was never supposed to be adversarial. It was supposed to be a supplement, a complement to these offices. And so we were quite taken aback when all of a sudden these folks are looked upon as enemies, really, to be scorned and criticized and maybe even sued. And so and then along with this was the continued deaths inside the city jail. I think now we are pretty much have an unprecedented kind of label that this is the most deaths in the city jail in the country per capita. I mean, and so it was this kind of urgency that we kept saying something, we got to do something. And we had a few older people that took up the call, and one of them was Rasheem Aldridge. And so I'm going to let him talk now about the way that the Board Bill 93 came about, what it took to get that, and what it hoped to accomplish based on what you all were seeing and hearing, not just from the DFOB, but actually from inmates, staff, from the city jail, and just seeing with your own eyes what was happening.
Well, can y'all hear me? Okay, yeah. First and foremost, I want to thank Mama Durala and CapCar for having this conversation. I'm sure this will be one of many. As just recently there was another death at the jail, like Reverend Gray said. Just less than 48 hours, 2 people have already resigned from the DFOB board. So I became alderman before state rep for the last 4 years, alderman back in April. And I served on the Public Safety Committee as the vice chairman of the Public Safety Committee. Very early on during that committee, we had a resignation from the commissioner, who is Commissioner Brumman. And I would say that is probably when, for myself as being alderman, when a lot of the red flags really started to come up with what was going on in the jail. He released a statement in a letter that was very alarming. I believe Reverend Gray was there, and other members had reached out to the Public Safety Committee that myself and other alder people sit on, and that was really the start I think as the board was just getting set up in April, maybe his resignation was a couple months after, so it was just June or July. And this board instantly, this new board I can speak on, instantly knew that there was a problem and we needed to address it. So for me, being very close to Reverend Gray and other people on the DFOB board, I started to ask questions of what's going on. We had already been having plenty of deaths before I had got there, under this administration and prior administration, so there clearly has been a problem. As more issues started to come out, I basically said, what can I do? Because outside of being a public servant, before that I've always was an activist. The things that I'm very passionate about is criminal justice reform. And no, jail is not a place for anybody, a place of luxury, but it definitely shouldn't be a place that is inhumane. And we started to have conversations with Reverend Gray and others, started to look at the legislation that was put forward by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, who put a fabulous board bill together that really not only set up DFOB, but the whole division for that. But with doing that kind of history and looking at the legislation, notice that back in 2021, Alderman Vaccaro was the one who set up DFOB, the actual board itself. And then as the new legislation came that only made it stronger, there was a little bit of, I wouldn't say conflict, but there was some oversight that needed to be changed. And it wasn't, as I continued to talk with Reverend Gray and continue to talk to other DFOB members, some that are still on the board, some that resigned, they explained to me some of the hurdles that they was coming into, especially when it came to training. That it seemed like the goalpost was constantly being moved further and further back when it came to training. For the board and the staff to be able to get access, to be able to actually know what's going on in the jail. Because ultimately, and I will give credit to, you know, I know this board cares about oversight. I believe this mayor also cares about oversight. Sometimes when you do legislation, there's unintended consequences that you just don't know about. And that's some of the things we noticed in the previous legislation, that some things just wasn't clear. The vehicle was already set up. I always tell this to Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, like she purchased a car. A lot of the changes we made in the piece of the legislation was really cleanup. She did a lot of the hard work of setting up the foundation of the actual division and everything else. But in being in public safety, which is probably my favorite committee, because as somebody who is intentional about making sure that we address criminal justice in a holistic way and that we change things and address issues and policies in the city of St. Louis that we haven't addressed in a long time, and not be nice about it, but be unapologetic about it. This was an opportunity to be able to start to clean up some of the legislation. So I sat down with Reverend Gray, I sat down when some of these concerns was brought to this committee. Because sometimes it's a lot of things that's all the people we juggling. From constituent calls to speed humps and potholes, so you may not know everything. And thankful, I mean, it really is due to the DFOB board, and I'm thankful that for the ones that are sticking around, the ones that left, I understand it becomes frustrating, but it was due to them bringing it forward to the Public Safety Committee for us as legislators to know, like, okay, we need to do more. And I can tell you after this legislation, we still gonna be doing more because we also gotta address the COB, but that'll be later down the line, we'll talk about that. But starting to have conversations with Reverend Gray, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, who actually filed a piece of legislation, people who was critical, Mama Jamala, John Chasnoff, to make sure that what are some of the things in the legislation that we can clean up, because the goal is to make sure that DFOB members have access. And some of the things that we cleaned up was putting in anonymous complaints, making sure that correctional officers that are in the jails actually be able to make complaints about what is going on anonymously so that they don't be retaliated against. The biggest thing that they talked about was training. When you looked at the previous legislation, it is, I don't think Reverend Gray would disagree, it's critical that members have training. You know, you're talking about confidential information, you're talking about individuals that when you walk into a jail, you just can't go in willy-nilly, right? So training was important. However, it wasn't clear on what that looked like, how many hours, what the actual training was. So we got very clear on what that training was. We put in language for legal counsel. Like Reverend Gray said, there's not one board probably in the city of St. Louis that won't have some type of input, just the way that our city is set up and operated, input from either the mayor's team, administration, or the city councilor. And the city councilor is some would say, end all be all for the decisions that is made legally. Her job is to protect and make sure the city is in good standing so we don't get sued, which is important. But when it comes to oversight, it is also important to have outside eyes, outside of city council. Not saying that she's doing anything wrong, but her job is to represent the city. So if something's happening negatively in the jail, her job is to make sure that she represents the city to cover all her bases. And one of the things that the DFOB members had said over and over is, we keep running into roadblocks when it comes to trying to get legal opinions. Not throwing anybody under the bus, but being able to have a legal opinion outside of the city so it's not a conflict of interest, which was critically important. But this was a long process, and like I say, a process that we will continue to work on this Public Safety Committee, because I know that oversight is important. And it was a lot of input from people that have been doing this work for a long time. I think the first bill was probably started with maybe Terry Kennedy, and then I think Antonio Fringe, and I know then Alderman Maccaro had did it with setting up DFOB, and then Alderwoman Shameen Clark really established a lot of it, and we followed up with her leadership, her being at the table, just to do some cleanup. So it's going to be a continuation of how do we get there, and how do we do it in a way that actually get to the goal of actual oversight? Because at the end of the day, one death in the jail is too many. Right. Since 2020 or 21, it's been 15 deaths in the jail. Like I say, at the end of the day, yes, and we are talking about individuals. Again, this is the jail. These are individuals that have not been found guilty. They literally sit in jail because for 3 months, some we've seen for 2 years because of a traffic violation. And they are sitting in this jail dealing with inhumane conditions, and oversight is extremely important. Oversight is important. It's important to have transparency and accountability over elected officials, over any entity that the city has. It's good to always have some extra eyes and ears. And honestly, I think this piece of legislation that we did clean up on, a piece of legislation that already was pretty good and really set the groundwork to be able to start to have these conversations, and like I say, did clean up. I think this cleanup that we did, due to a lot of the legends in the room that's been doing this work, will just be another piece to try to get closer to more oversight. But I can sit here and tell you this is not perfect. If you think after it got passed that it is done, no, we may have to come back again. I've already talked with Mama about, we got to address COB, a board that has not met for over a year. And we have to see how this piece of legislation, some of the cleanup legislation, play out with board members, as they have been amazing with communicating with the Board of Aldermen. Like Reverend Gray said, when it comes to DFOB, this Public Safety Committee stands 110 toes down when it comes to oversight of DFOB. And as they're doing the work, we need to know what's going on so that we can continue to further this piece of legislation and other pieces of legislation to bring more oversight, to ensure, and it is not to point fingers at nobody, it's about accountability, transparency, and saving people's lives. Because again, while the jail is not a place of luxury, it should never be a place that is inhumane, where inmates are sitting in their jail cells and only getting out for 2 hours, or not getting medical care, or literally dying on our hands. So what can we do? And I'm excited about what's going to come out of this, but I know this isn't the end. And I look forward to figuring out what can be next, because there's a lot of moving pieces to this jail that we call the CJC that unfortunately, I'm sure before the end of the year, there may be another death that happened. And we have to stop it. And I'm just thankful, especially thankful to Mama Jamala and John Chasnoff and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and Reverend Gray and DFOB members for actually taking a lot of hours of putting the work. We filed the bill, but we had probably 3 or 4 committee hearings. We have 5 changes because we left some things out that we wanted to make sure was in that piece of legislation. And I think right now what we have is a good start, but we're going to have to continue to move that needle, and we're going to have to continue to add things to ensure that we get true oversight and transparency and make sure no department, no matter if you're the alderperson, you're the mayor, or you're the city councilor, or you're the jail commissioner, or you're the public safety director, that they don't stand in the middle of making sure that there's true oversight when it comes to our jails in the city of St. Louis.
Thank you, Alderperson, for that report, because I think when I was listening to you, one of the things that was really important to CAPCAR from the very beginning is how do we democratize the processes and the departments. And so we, even when we did the first COB legislation, we had levels of input from citizens, from voters, to say how is this going to be done and who gets to approve. Some of the things that kept us from being totally independent was the outdated city charter. And so some of it, we kept bumping up against that. Well, you can't do this because it's a city charter. So I know that there's a citizens commission now to look at the city charter. I'm just hoping they don't have the same issues that the COB is having and the DFOB when it comes to here's our recommendations. Because one of the things that I think is really sad is the fact that citizens voluntarily said, I want to be on this committee. I want to be a part of the COB, and they have gotten nothing but grief. Because I think it bodes particularly sad for the other citizen-based organizations and bodies and that kind of thing. The other thing I have to say, Alderperson, with all due respect, sometimes accountability does mean pointing fingers, and I don't have no problem with that. If all your interest is covering your ass, we really should be talking about the safety of our citizens wherever they are, whether they be out on the street or in jail. That's the primary responsibility of all elected officials. So I'm just going to say that before I hand it over to Ruby Bonner. And one thing I'm going to say about this office is that from the very beginning, and this has to be really clear, this office understood why it was in existence. They understood that it was citizens who came together, who put together legislation as to why they are in existence. And they had operated as really not just civil servants, but servants of the people. So I'm gonna let Ruby Bonner talk about, I mean, she's had a short term, but again, she's got an earful and an eye full since she's been there. But before I turn it over to you, Ruby, I wanted to make 2 announcements. One, I forgot to tell people that the live streaming is on YouTube on CAPCAR's channel. There was another one that now I forgot, but I'll remember it again. So Ruby, you want to talk us about what is the role of your office and how has it been stymied in this last year and a half because of all of the negative goings on?
Thank you so much for inviting me, Jamala. Is this one? Can you hear me, everybody? I can speak pretty loud. I gotta hold it. That's better. That's better. If I may, I want to thank Jamala and CAPCAR for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here. I don't mind telling you that I have followed Ms. Rogers for a number of years, and I so admire her work and the influence that she has on the city. There's another icon of mine sitting in the audience, Mr. Percy Green, who I don't mind saying had a tremendous impact on me. His work led, really, literally, to my decision to go to law school. So I want to get that out of the way and let you know that just being in their presence, first of all, makes me a little nervous. And then second of all, to speak on the topic that we're here to discuss. I wanted to say a little bit about my personal background because I'm probably not the truest representative of a government bureaucrat. You know, I came out of retirement to come back to the city to do this work. And as I've said before, I paid attention early on. You heard Jamala talk about starting civilian oversight 20 years ago. I was paying attention. I am the mother of 2 male children and about 8 grandchildren, 5 of whom are male, whom I've always felt were particularly at the center of the work that needs to be done here. So I share that with you because I've also been in and around government at the state, the local levels, and even at the federal government. I still believe that laws, along with the advocacy that we have coming from the Detention Facility Board, from our Board of Aldermen, all of us working together, the community, is very, very crucial that we stay involved when we're trying to do something that hasn't been done before. So I want to acknowledge this work, and I just applaud Ms. Rogers, CAPCAR, the Organization for Black Struggle, Mr. Green, all of the efforts that have come from the community to address racism and oppression and give voices to the voiceless. So I don't want you to leave here thinking that Ruby Bonner is a part of this system that may be causing some of the obstruction. But I bring, I believe, a kind of knowledge of how government works that I was hopeful when I came out of retirement would be helpful in furthering the work that others have done on the front line. You know, I've been out there on the streets in my younger days. I was somewhat of an activist. I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin, who at that time was pretty progressive and very much involved in activism. So I know a little bit about working from the street level as well. But I also believe, since I was given an opportunity to get a law degree, I believe that some of us can be effective attempting to work within the city, within government, and helping in that way. Obviously, when you're within the system, though, there are some restrictions. Right up front, there are some restrictions in terms of what you can and cannot do. Because within the ordinances from the very beginning, the staff that is supposed to support the COB and the DFOB have to bring a kind of neutrality, a kind of a apolitical perspective to their role. And when I decided to come back into city government at this advanced point in my life, I came because I was extremely impressed with the mere fact that the Board of Aldermen got legislation passed, because I saw some of the early pushback. And I happen to know many of the legislators that sponsored the legislation. As a matter of fact, Shamim Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman, is my alderperson. This young, wonderful person to my left, I've had the privilege of knowing at the state level and the local level, and I know he's a true warrior from working with them. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about me so that I can answer whatever questions you may have. And I was asked once the former commissioner abruptly resigned, I was asked to take over the day-to-day operations. Actually, there was another person from the mayor's office who was also given some responsibilities for providing the support to the DFOB, because as we've said, the COB has basically been inactive since I've been back with the city, which has been a little over a year now, came back in August. So I've been working in the capacity of deputy commissioner, overseeing day-to-day operations since May. And I also echo the fact that this is one of the most knowledgeable, committed boards I've ever had the privilege of working with. And I've served on a number of not-for-profit boards, volunteer boards, and I can tell you this, I'm just very impressed with every last one of them. They each bring the perspective that I think the original ordinance was intended for them to bring. The ordinance stepped out very specifically the categories of members it wanted to see on this board. And so the board reflects the ordinance very, very clearly. And it's been a personal privilege and honor to work with them. Frustrating, yes, but I have thoroughly enjoyed working with this board. And I'll accept any questions that any of you might have.
Thank you, Ruby, because you made me remember what I couldn't remember just a minute ago, and that is that Alderwoman Shameen is in the house.
Oh, is she?
She's here, and she's willing to answer any questions. I'm going to keep her seat warm up here, but she's part of the panel, and she's also part of the process that Rasheen talked about so eloquently. So we're going to open it up for questions, and again, keep it short so we can get to as many as we can. But I want to start off with, this is a question somebody had that could not be here, and this is for you, Rasheen. When is the mayor going to sign the bill, 993?
Oh yeah, it's already been signed.
Okay, it's been signed.
It's been signed.
Okay, so it is law. That means it's law.
December 5th.
December 5th, so we can get to rocking, y'all, and we can get to holding people accountable and naming names. So I know Alumni Broadcasting Association is doing the streaming. So now I got a question that Bree answered. Folks who want to ask the question, they have to ask it in the mic. Okay, so give me some guidance. This one's not going to go very far.
Yep.
But this one isn't needed unless I do this little thing here. Oh, they have to come up. Okay, so y'all got to move it. So who's got a question? Just start lining up over here. That way we can keep it moving. Yeah, question. Okay, come on. Don't be bashful. And then Steve, if you line up behind him, are we just gonna do? You come on. You come on. Yeah. This is what we're gonna do.
Before the question, could I just acknowledge one of our board members?
Okay.
Hillary Stuckey, just want to acknowledge.
Hillary Stuckey's here,
Board members.
DFOB, so she might be able to answer some questions too. No, DFOB. And also want to acknowledge somebody just came in town from Flint, Michigan. She's here. And I just want to say that when we get to thinking about how bad St. Louis is and all that we have to go through, I think about people like Nayera Sharif, who's from Flint, Michigan, on the front lines of organizing against the toxic environmental racism that's raging there that has even affected her. She's a victim of that herself, but still has to keep fighting. So when I think about all this foolishness going on here, I think about Nayera, there she is, and I think, yes, I can keep going. If Nayera can do it, I can do it. Here you go. No, you can take it.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, my question, or statement, whichever you want to call it, was the situation with the city council. It seems to me that the city council would have a vested interest in taking steps to reduce the deaths and injuries caused by the city jail. Now, the first little inside information I got on why they do that is because they're trying to act as corporate attorneys rather than governmental representatives. So rather than representing a governmental body, my son was killed 2019, but prior to that, Chief Hayden stated on a televised cast, Channel 9, on the history of policing in St. Louis, and he said today they were trying to run the police department as a business. So when it comes to liability, businesses fight, tooth and nail. So now he made that statement, and a couple of years later, like I said, my son was killed in 2018, and by their own admission, he was tortured based on a fictitious medical condition called a sight delirium, that the prescribed treatment was initially torture, physical attack. He was tased, then he was given a sedative, and he died from the sedative. So thus the sedative became a lethal injection on a street corner. Now, all of that, and they saying that they're kind of handle it like a business, and deny compensation or deny wrongdoing and all that. So, but it's obvious that you had 10 people die in 2 years. There's something wrong with that jail. I started going to jail when I was 5 years old. First time I was had an encounter with the police, I was 5 years old. I was stealing some crackers off a highway. So I've been in and out of jail. Never heard of anybody somewhere where 10 people died in 2 years. So there's something wrong with that jail. It's ought to be out with anybody. Now, so to wrap it up, I don't want to take up too much time. So I'm saying I'm going to leave you with that counselor should have a vested interest as an attorney to reduce the deaths and injuries and take any input from anybody that wants to show them a way to reduce those deaths. That is making the city more liable than taking the stance that he's going to run it like a business and just fight the lawsuits. All right, thank you.
First of all, my brother, we are sorry for your loss.
All right.
But your particular comment and question is echoed throughout this community because people kept hearing that they didn't want, the city council's office was protecting the city from unnecessary lawsuits, and people kept saying, well, how is that working when you let people die and now their only recourse is to file a lawsuit? What? Something is missing here. So I'm going to see if the panelist has an answer to the question of what is the role of a city councilor if it's not to protect the citizens?
I don't have a problem with pointing fingers. I've made it very clear, and I've been very vocal, publicly and otherwise, that I'm totally against, number one, the city councilor's involvement with the FOB. I've made it very clear, I've made it very public. I've also, as the alderperson said, it was one of the reasons that we stressed the whole idea of the DFOB being allowed to retain its own legal counsel. And I'm glad that we at least got that into the ordinance, although still somewhat restrictive because the RFP process, the procurement process, still has to go through the city councilor. And so the reality is that everything and all things legal, all things legal have got to go through the city councilor's office. My specific problem with this city councilor, and I don't have a problem saying it, I've said it before. Number one, it's the same city councilor that some of us had to provide some pushback against qualified immunity. Now, this is supposedly a progressive administration. You would think that the city councilor's position in protecting the city, that somewhere too, there's got to be this administration's position on progressive government. There's nothing progressive about the city council and her opinions. And so I don't have a problem saying that. It is problematic. And I would like to think, although that might be a problem, that the mayor may not know, but this city council also came out of the same legal community as Gabe Gore. And Gabe Gore made it very clear what he's going to do. He got rid of the exclusion list. He got rid of that. In the last big bust, where they had 43 arrests, if you got 751 detainees now, and the Commissioner of Corrections said to me and other members of the board in the tour that we received the other day, those numbers are going to go up over the holidays. Well, we know that those numbers are going to go up. If you have 750 plus detainees now, and those numbers go up, and as the alderman said, you've got detainees who are not getting out of their cells for 22, 23 hours at a time. We're not sure who you're mixing, nonviolent, violent, mental illness, non-mental illness. We don't know what's going on in there. There's no category that's spelled out. That's the information we want, but every time we ask a question of this counselor, this city councilor, or the correction commissioner, we get the legal pushback. And so, and for us, as the gentleman said, and again, our condolences for your loss, all we're trying to do as a board, we're not trying to contribute to legal suits, to lawsuits. We're not trying to do that. Our job is, by getting the information and taking a somber second look as citizens, what could have been done to prevent? You're talking about suicide, you're talking about drug abuse, you're talking about natural causes. Our job is to say, okay, let's move back from the deaths. Let's start walking it back. What policy was followed? What procedure was followed? What was done or not done that maybe could have prevented it? Like I said, we're not trying to maximize liability. We're trying to minimize liability. Our job is to look at the conditions that could have led to A, B, or C. And so I do have an issue with this city councilor and her very conservative stance. But I understand it because she comes from a very conservative group of lawyers. And so that has to be said. I'm hoping that was helpful to this gentleman. Thank you for the question. It allowed me to give a real long answer.
Thank you. I don't really have a question, but I just have a recommendation. I'm almost finished with reading Tony Messenger's Profit in Punishment, the Criminalization of the Poor. And it's a Pulitzer Prize award, and it's outstanding. And it's everything we've been talking about. I would have brought it with me tonight if I had known what we were going to be talking about.
You just came because you just.
But it is simply outstanding. The documentation that he has for St. Louis, but the state of Missouri, it's because again, it's all about the money and the poor people. It's again, it brought the mental health. Basically, it's creating mental dishealth. Thank you.
Did anybody want to respond to that? Ready for the next question?
I'm gonna jump in on the previous one. I will say one thing that Mama Jamala brought up that's important. Right now we have the Charter Commission going. So we have members on the Charter Commission. The charter hasn't been changed since I was born. And longer than that. Way before that. I was just being joking, but way before that. But one of the issues that, Reverend Gray has already hit on it. I agree. We do have a very, like he said, me and him was out there protesting to make sure that this city council didn't take qualified immunity all the way up to the federal courts, meaning that at any time we wanted to protest against police, that it would almost just be in void. And fought it to the teeth. This was before I was an alderperson. It comes from a very conservative law firm. But what's more important, what kind of even tied our hands in this legislation is the charter states that literally the city councilor is the start, the middle, and the end. So we was able to, and it's not perfect, but we was able to put some language in there that took away some power from her, because it is a conflict if you have this city councilor that is going to defend and represent the city, and when members want to know what's going on in the jail, they can't because it's an ongoing investigation, and then it's a conflict of, it just continues on. So Reverend Gray hit everything already, but I just want to, for the people watching and everybody here, remember that we got a charter commission, and it's extremely important that we look at ways that we can change our charter, because when it does come to the city councilor, it is hard to do anything legally because she represents everybody. Quote unquote, you represent me too, because I work for the board of aldermen, but she may not agree to some challenges that we have legally that I can't speak on, but it is important that people know about that the charter commission do exist as well.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm a little nervous, so I apologize if my voice shakes. My question is, have you guys tried to work with any of the offices committed to making the change? So like the Office of Violence Prevention, or any of the other people who are going into the jails and seeing it firsthand. My main question is because those people who, including myself, who go into the city jail are taught during our training to not talk to anybody about what they see, what we see in the jail. Including the media, boards, pretty much anything. We are instructed that we are not supposed to talk about this. So I guess that is my main question, is how do we go around that, and how do we get some of these offices that are dedicated to making the change to actually do something about it?
I'm not going to speak so much on the office, more than I'm going to get to the commissioner, who I've staunchly said and I stand by, and I will say today, I believe that we need a new commissioner when it comes to the jails. We need somebody who is going to take on accountability, someone who's not going to continue to not take on responsibility, and not allow transparency. When DFOB went into the jail, I was going over there. You'd think as an alderperson, and State Rep Kim Collins, on the state level, there's a state statute that allows state reps to go into any facility. Now, if I was still a state rep, I can go to Bonterra right now and have access without calling anybody or doing anything. Unfortunately, that's not the same thing in the city yet, but we're working on legislation to change that too. But when I tried to go with DFOB members, I was told I can't enter and that I have to wait to a scheduled visit. Note though, that all the people did do a pop-up visit probably just a month and a half before that, and we was able to enter. So, and when we did enter, we was told that we cannot talk to inmates, which is problematic. Again, just a few months after that, Cori Bush, our congresswoman, and President Megan Green went in, and they was able to get access, and they was able to talk to inmates. So there's not no real clear line of what necessarily can happen, and I think if there's nothing to hide in the jail, if things are running perfectly, there shouldn't be no requirements of don't talk to inmates. Now, I do understand maybe if there's some pending litigation, right? You don't want to find yourself, they know who is have a court case that has some pending litigation you can't talk to. But when we was there, we didn't talk to people, but inmates were screaming out to us like, the shower downstairs don't work. And when we went downstairs, the shower didn't work. And we asked questions about it, and it was like, we put a work order in. Or somebody said they didn't get their medicine. And when we asked the commissioner, she was like, I'm not aware, but I'm gonna move on it, right? But it's important to have more transparency in our jails, to be able to ask questions, to be able to get to the root of the problem, because ultimately, what we try to do as elected officials or DFOB members, we're trying to help the commissioner. We're trying to help because we also want to make sure we save another life, someone that is not lost in this place that is kind of inhumane.
And I would just add to the question, there are many groups who have a relationship with that jail and the people that are in it. And so even though when you go in, you may not be able to talk or you may not be able to share what's with you, the residents in that facility, and even in prison, like you said, they'll shout out. They'll let you know. And we've gotten calls, we've gotten texts, we've gotten letters to say, here's what's going on. And so we feel committed to figuring out what's going on. So I would say groups like, the Office of Violence Prevention join in, particularly when we have these legislative sessions, and need that voice, those other voices, to make sure that all of us are on the same page with making sure that people are safe in that facility and have what they need. I'm from the 60s, and when there were jail uprisings, it was because of the guards and the terrorism of the guards, and then folks now like taking hostages to get a piece of y'all. Oh, what? Because they don't feel like they're being fed, and that definitely they're not getting the medical treatment that they deserve. So something is fundamentally wrong, and that's what we're trying to get to the root to.
And to also to respond, and the deputy commissioner spoke about that. The ordinance was very specific about diversity on the board, and unfortunately, the last two board members that resigned, they led nonprofit organizations, and so that information and them being on the board was extremely valuable to the board itself. The good news about that is that organizations who do have any contact, direct or otherwise, with detainees, one of the amendments allows for the anonymous complaints, and so we would encourage organizations, people who work with detainees, please call the staff. Please call Miss Louisa. Please call. I got in trouble saying Miss Louisa. Please call Miss Louisa. Please call the deputy commissioner. Let the staff know, and they can receive complaints. Now that was one of the things that, as the Alderman said, enhanced this ordinance, and so we're able to do that. And so please, by all means, and as board members, if organizations contact board members will take those concerns to the staff. And we do have a public comment opportunity when we have our board meetings. And so we're always, we welcome anybody to provide any information that you have. And then just to the Alderman's point, or to Mother Jamala's point, with the pizza incident, when we visited the jail, and we do sign a confidentiality agreement as well. So there are some things we cannot talk about, and we don't. We understand that. We're not, as we try to explain to the commissioner, we're not stupid and we're not naive. And to be honest with you, that conversation with her made a lot of the board members feel that this commissioner feels that we are inadequate, inept, unintelligent. It made us feel that she thinks that we don't understand what's happening in the jail. I'm a former correctional officer. We do understand what's happening in the jail, but if a detainee says that I kidnapped a guard because you're not feeding us, and we're not able to investigate that, then as far as we're concerned, it happened. And that's what they don't understand. But if the staff is able to do a proper, thorough investigation, and they find that complaint is frivolous. That. What she said. that it has no value or it's not true. That's what we're trying to explain to the commissioner. If you allow the staff to do their job, that might be more helpful to you than harmful. She's not understanding that.
Right.
And she said, she never made love for me because I've been too political about criticizing her. But God bless her.
Hi everyone. So a lot of you in the room know me, I'm Malik. Of course, shout out to the king, Mr. Percy Green, my mentor, my main man. So we have State Representative Collins in the house, and Reverend Gray mentioned Louisa. This is Louisa, you all. She's been on deck from the beginning. She's a tireless worker. So, of course, I'm an OBS member, and I'm a friend of the board. But I have a direct question to the board. We go out and visit. So people call me and they ask me, and they say, and this is to Mr. Gray and the others that were fortunate enough to go in, and they asked me, they said, well, Malik, it was supposed to have been a jail tour, but from what we understand, it was a visit with Abdullah. So I would like to give Mr. Gray and whoever else went in with him to articulate exactly what that was, because a visit and a tour is two different things. And those of you who know me know that I have been incarcerated, so I definitely know the difference between a tour, because I was one of the ones saying, hey, I see that toilet broke. Well, he wasn't even born at that time. However, I was one of those. So, Mr. Gray, would you elaborate on that for us, please? And thank you.
It would be a pleasure. Again, there are certain things that I cannot talk about. Confidentiality agreement, it is what it is. We made a request weeks in advance for a 2-hour site visit. And we deliberately used the word site visit. We didn't want to use the word tour. We put it in writing. The deputy commissioner communicated with Commissioner Clemens Abdullah. We want a 2-hour site visit. And this is what we want to do during that 2 hours. We want to meet with the wing representatives. We knew we couldn't meet with every detainee, but each wing has a representative. We wanted to meet with the wing representative. We wanted to visit the kitchen. We wanted to speak to medical staff. We wanted to speak to some correctional officers and or administrative people. We were very clear about what we wanted to see. We were very clear about who we wanted to talk to. And we thought 2 hours. The ordinance says that given prior approval, as a board, we should have that access. We got there and we're told we had 50 minutes. We had 50 minutes. We understood after we were told we had 50 minutes. Well, first of all, let me back up. When we were told we had 50 minutes, I said to the commissioner, that's unacceptable. And I said that to her publicly, in front of board members, in front of staff, in front of her senior staff. She said, this is what I'm going to show you. We're going to take you to the kitchen, I think the laundry room, and the 5th floor. The 5th floor, there's nobody on the 5th floor. But she wanted to show us that the locks were fixed and that it was clean. It was a very clean, secure place with no detainees. Once we got on the 5th floor, we started talking. And so, for me as a board member in this chair, I felt that rather than seeing what she wanted us to see, let's have a conversation. Because we've never had a face-to-face. It was the first time. So I was saying, okay, if we only have 50 minutes, rather than allowing you to show us what you want us to see, let's just talk. And that's what we did for about 30 minutes. And we had a conversation. And she did most of the talking. She was telling us what her experience in federal prison, which in and of itself, to me, was problematic because the CJC is not a prison. It's a detention center. She comes with a prison mentality. And it was so obvious. So that's why I'm saying that my comments afterwards, that I felt it was more productive to have that conversation with her than to allow her to become a puppet master. I wasn't going to have it. She made her comments about what she thought about the DFOB. She made a comment that, well, there's some things I can't say because y'all go out and talk to people, as if we don't understand our role as board members, our legal role, or as if the staff did not understand its legal role. She talked to us as if we were stupid. That's what I got out of the conversation. But it was important to understand her mindset on what she thought about DFOB, its members, and its role and responsibility. And so that's what took place. She ended up having to go over to the court to meet with the judges, which I respected. But if we had been told that in advance, that you're only going to get 50 minutes because I have to meet with the judges, there's something, we understand that, we get that. She has a schedule too. But the way in which we were treated showed me that she has very little regard for DFOB, for oversight, and for the work that we do. And I have no problem saying her words to me, Reverend Gray, I don't have any love lost for you because you have vilified us in the public. My response is, I'm going to say what I believe to be true. If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. And just like I say, whatever I say in public, if I'm wrong, I'll say in public, I'm wrong. But if you don't give us an opportunity to do that, when we talk about the training, and I've gone through all the training. We've got 4 board members, including Ms. Stuckey, who has gone through the training. We have 4 board members. For them to say you need to go through 16 hours of training in order to have access to the building. But you've had all kind of people who you've allowed in, giving them more access, but they don't have our responsibility. We got more access to the CJC under former Mayor Lyda Crusoe than we have under current Mayor Tashara Jones. I don't have a problem saying that, only because it's true. I love Tashara. I love the mayor. But I'm still going to say what is true. I'm not going to play around. I'm not going to beat around the bush. We've lost we've lost tremendous board members, committed to what's going on, fierce warriors for social justice. Because at the end of the day, they believe that we've been betrayed.
So, Reverend Gray, let me just ask you this, because this was also a question that came up. Is the board still firmly behind the demand that the commissioner be terminated, be fired, or resign?
That's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked me. The simple answer, direct answer is yes. The board voted. It was unanimous. We all voted, it was unanimous. I did say that, number one, they're not going to fire her. Number two, she's civil service. So even firing her without, you've got to have, so we're not naive as a board.
We don't have due cause?
It depends. I think we have due cause. I believe we do. I mean, you got how many deaths under your watch? That in and of itself. And you can't say, well, people came in here with pre-existing conditions. Our question was, what diagnosis have you done? What medical treatment? And the reality is this, what we understand, medical folk can't do their job without correctional officers being present with them either. So if you had, in 2021, you had 200 officers there. You had 200 officers. The max complement is 263. So in 2021, you had 200. Now you have less than that. One of the questions that ought to be asked, why the decline in correctional officers? Was it retirement? Was it, were they fired? Were they quit? We need that information too, that under your watch, you've lost this many correctional officers. How many have you hired? And we asked that question. One of the issues and I wasn't a big open residency requirement person. I wasn't a big person, particularly with police. But one of the arguments or the rationale was, well, you know, we've got all these inmates here. A lot of our correctional officers know a lot of the inmates because you're hiring from the same community. So you can have as many scans as you want. But construction people don't go through the same scrutiny as other folks. You got a lot of different ways that drugs come up. But anyway, that's once again, at the end of the day, if the staff is not allowed to do its job, then we'll never know the truth.
We got a couple more questions, and then we're going to get some wrap-up comments.
Yes. Of course. Hi, everyone. My name's Keith. I'm with CapCar Steering Committee. I wanted to just, while she's here, thank Representative Kimberly Ann Collins. So I do a lot about prison work in Missouri, and I can tell you that in my personal knowledge, no human in the state of Missouri has done more to help other incarcerated people in the state of Missouri than Representative Kimberly Ann Collins has in her few years that she's been the state representative. She goes around and visits people in prisons and makes sure that they have the things that they need. She doesn't have to do that. Most of her colleagues don't. Most of her colleagues don't care. But she is someone who uses her position to help those people in our society who are incarcerated because she can. And I want to contrast her with Mayor Tashara Cruzen and what the mayor has not done to help the many people who are in her care, even though she... Oh, I'm so sorry. Tashara, I have this... Sometimes the truth slips the ways. Mayor Tashara Jones, and what she has done with the power she has, she sits across the street from a jail where people are being tortured every single day by her own staff. She has a city councilor who refuses to let the people we have chosen to investigate the abuses of that jail do their job. And so I just, as someone who voted for the mayor, as someone who volunteered and campaigned for the mayor, it upsets me. And I think when we talk about accountability means pointing fingers, I think it's important that we do. And so as election year comes up, I think it's important that we remember who has and has not fulfilled their promises. And that is why I'm going to be supporting people like Representative Kimberly Ann Collins for whatever position she's running for, because she has proven to me, even when no one's looking, that she's helping the people she can help. And that means a lot to me. But moving on, I want to say I'm a little hot because like Mama Jamala, like John Chasnoff, I have spent thousands of hours over the last few years, thousands of hours of non-paid time creating and fixing and trying to staff up a civilian oversight board and then the detention facilities oversight board. And it really bothers me that not only this whole conversation, but most of the things in the press that we've been hearing is about the DFOB, the Detention Facilities Oversight Board. And it seems that we've all forgotten the civilian oversight board, the one that works for the police outside of the jail, right? We heard that they haven't met in over a year. I can tell you that even the people who are currently on that board, all of their terms expire in 15 more days. There will be no people who are serving on current terms in that board, and that seems to be fine. We've just given up on that board, and it's really sad because we worked so hard. I know that Alderwoman Clark Hubbard has spent so much time trying to make that board work. I know that the commissioners and the staff, Ms. Louisa, have spent so much time on that board, and it just hasn't been able to function, and it's been overshadowed by the DFOB. And I want to talk about what happens when we don't have that board. Because I don't know if you recall, but there was a time when we were fighting. We fought for decades, not me, but people like Jamala, people like Percy fought for decades to get the COB created. And it was because every few years we were having riots in the streets because individual police officers, groups of police officers had abused our citizens. And there was a compromise made between the people in the streets and the people in charge that we would create this board, like a referee, to call what was and was not acceptable behavior. And the people went home and they trusted the system. They said, okay, I trust you to write legislation. I trust you to get public input to staff it. I trust you to have public meetings and at least tell us what decisions you're making about personnel. But that hasn't happened. And I fear, as someone who lives in St. Louis, I fear that we are once again getting back into the cycle of there's going to be riots because there's no one holding the police accountable. There's really not. I fear that once again we're going to be told, oh, just go home, we'll create another board. And I fear as someone who loves my neighbors that it's also going to be ineffective. And so as we sit here and we talk about inaction and what's not happening, I do want to underscore the urgency. Because thousands and thousands of St. Louisans demanded a civilian oversight board, and they haven't even had a meeting for more than a year. Because thousands of St. Louisans watched as people broke windows out of our jail while they campaigned for their own freedom, and yet the people we've appointed to tell us what's going on in there can't even get inside. It concerns me as a St. Louisan that the administration that sits across the street from that building wants us to continue on with business as usual. So hearing what I've heard tonight, what I am going to be doing is lobbying the people on this charter commission, they only have a few more months of work, for them to change the St. Louis City Charter to allow someone other than the mayor's city councilor to be able to give advice to these independent boards, someone who is not beholden to the city taxpayers, someone who is not going to use our financial incentives to try to shut down justice. And so that is what I am hearing needs to be done, and that is the call that I am going to be taking up, and I thank you all for giving me that information.
Thank you, Steve. I know Representative Kimberly Clark, I'm sorry, ma'am, the representative was next in line. She just stood back. Okay, go ahead. She's relenting. She was doing her social distancing.
I almost forgot what I was going to say now. I have a quick question. You got a jail 30 minutes away, 15 if you hop on Highway 40. So have we compared to what's going on in St. Louis City to St. Louis County? Not to say they're not doing everything right. Not to say that they're doing everything right, but apparently we can agree they haven't had 15 deaths relaxed. So have anybody looked at that, or what?
Yes,
What's the difference between St. Louis City and St. Louis County?
It is in the management. It's we've had an
Opportunity to meet with the director in the county, the new director and the previous director, met with him several times. Actually, at one point, we were going to recommend to the county that they adopt the same ordinance. They also have, they have an advisory committee for the county jail. Where we have an oversight board, they have an advisory committee. The difference is, although the advisory committee, in my humble opinion, doesn't really have the teeth that it needs, it hasn't needed the teeth that's necessary. They have an excellent relationship with the director in the county, with the current one and with the previous one. The director out there was always very open, very accessible, and made the facility accessible. So the difference is in the management. The difference out there is that they have somebody who understands it's a detention center, and here we have somebody who thinks she's running a prison.
I think that's an excellent question. Thank you for that. We're going to make the last question comment from Representative Kimberly Ann Collins.
Okay. Hey, how you doing, everyone? Hi. I am State Representative Kimberly Ann Collins, and I do represent the City of St. Louis in the Missouri House of Representatives, 102nd General Assembly. And I actually have 3 questions. So my first question, and of course I love going into the prisons. I've probably done more than 300 prison pop-ups in the last 2 years. Question 1 is, there is effort underway in the state to restore voting rights for those individuals that are on probation or parole. What efforts are being taken to make sure that those detainees are voting because they are not yet convicted of a crime? They are innocent until proven guilty, and so is the Board of Election working with the city jail to develop some type of formation of making sure that those inmates have the right to vote and are educated that they still can vote. So that is question number one. Question number two is, I see Ms. Kim here, and there was a question about, I got your name right, Ms. Kim? There was a question about collaboration between organizations. And so as we know that there is an uptick in overdoses in the city jail, and there has been no real investigation as to how these drugs are getting in the city jails. There are organizations like Wellston Loop CDC, Restorative Justice, Reach One, Communities First, that are a part of an initiative called Grow STL, and they do work 24/7 around drug and substance abuse, and their primary goal is to make sure that they are upticking the numbers in treatment. And so there are organizations that exist to help with that and that are recognized by DMH and are recognized by DOC. Could there potentially be some collaboration between those organizations that are out on the street every day that can do some outreach in these jails, or in particular the city jail, to make sure that individuals are educated around drug and substance abuse? And then my last question is the grievance process inside of the jail. What does that look like? Because at the state level, we do have a grievance process in the Missouri Department of Corrections. It is not always followed as it should be, but does the jail have a process? Is there any IRR forms for like informal resolution requests? Are there any grievance forms that are given to inmates if they have issues and they need resolutions to those issues? What is the process behind how issues are documented and handled inside of the jail? Thank you.
Well, that's quite a bit, so I'm gonna let Ruby start with the questions, because some of them I think do have to do with the relationship between that office and what they're able to do, but those were excellent questions that were given.
I can say relative to the IRRs, when I first came to the division in August of 22, our staff members were actually having access to the jail. They were meeting with dorm reps, and they were receiving the IRRs, which we treated as a written complaint. We processed the IRRs that we got in the same way that we did a complaint that was completed online or one that was completed by someone who came into the office. At some point, and Louisa, you might help me to know exactly when, that stopped. We no longer got the IRRs. We no longer was able to sit in on the dorm rep meetings. And so the same issues that Reverend Gray has already talked about in terms of the lack of access also extends to staff. Representative Collins, with respect to the issue about the collaborations and partnering with other organizations, we have collaboration issues, I guess, around the work that we are trying to do. We want to, and the ordinance provides that we should be, doing community outreach. And one of the reasons why we haven't really fully engaged in those activities and part of that work plan has to do with the fact that we have had to address several different ordinances in a very short period of time. And the thought, certainly by the former commissioner, and I've kind of maintained that stance, is that before we begin to go into the communities, we want to be able to have something to say. Of course, now, Mrs. Rogers, she's gonna bring us in anyway, and we're gonna say what it is we can do or can't do. I mean, that's how she got it. But to have a full collaboration, I believe, does require bringing something with you to the other organization. other than, okay, here's our ordinance, this is what it says we can do, and then not being able to provide some tangible results as, you know, as a result of totally completing the work that we're supposed to be doing in support of our boards. I hope that helps. And come forward, Ms. Lyles. This is our lead investigator. She's actually over the investigative unit in the division.
As Deputy Commissioner Barnard stated, in 2021, our office was meeting with the Commissioner Jennifer Abdul when she first came in. In fact, then we had Commissioner Kim Taylor Riley and myself, and she and myself were meeting with her on a weekly basis, every week, because we knew that at that time they were talking about doing the oversight, including the detention facilities. So we were trying to compile information. So we did get all the IRRs at that time. But when the reality that oversight of the jails was going to actually take place, that relationship ended. There were no more meetings with the commissioner. We received no more IRRs from that point on. And we were meeting with the dorm reps, and that was very valuable. So right now, anybody who's detaining into the facility, we do not have our forms in the facility. They do not have access to the complaint forms that we have on their tablets. So if family members do not email us, or somehow or another someone in the jail may contact us, it's very difficult for us to get the complaints involving the detainees inside the jail, and we have not been able to go in and do any type of investigation.
Thank you for that.
There was one last question that didn't get answered.
As far as the voting rights are concerned, I just let the elected officials maybe answer that.
I'm going to be quick. I know Alderwoman Clark was speaking. I know we're getting close on time. I won't touch the voting rights. I'm going to touch on the overdose. So if people, as I said, if people just watched the recent public safety committee hearing. We just had a public safety committee hearing. We had Coyle, the public safety director Coyle, come in. I think before we have people come in to kind of address, to help people with overdose, first is we got to figure out how the drugs get in. So what we don't do right now in the city of St. Louis, we actually don't keep track of overdose. So the city don't know how many overdoses happening. Anytime something happen with an inmate, they use Narcan. They just use it every time. They have no process of what, if a person that was on Narcan needed Narcan because it was an overdose, or if they was, fell over and hit their head, they just literally use Narcan every time. Now we keep track of how many times people use Narcan, but we don't know how many individuals have actually overdosed. And that's something like that the news and stuff and the public safety committee has dived into. We don't even know when people that go from the jail to the hospital, because we don't do a toxicology report, which that's another change which St. Charles do, which that's an ordinance we need to do in the city. So we don't even know if it is truly an overdose or a human case or anything. So to the overdose questions, I think back to what Ms. Ruby said, before we allow people to come in, we got to clean house first and figure out what are overdoses, if actual overdoses are actually happening in our city jails.
Well, it's one last question that's not answered.
You want to get to the voting, maybe?
Well, I mean, I don't know if any of us can really answer it, because as a board, we don't.
Yeah, and certainly as a division, that's an issue we ought to be collaborating with. But I will say that there are members of the staff, including myself. I'm a member of a sorority that's very actively involved in voting initiatives within the city. Louisa works very closely, I think is a member of the League of Women Voters, who also has, voting rights as a priority. So I can certainly, I can't say I can tell you if that initiative is on the table, but just having you mention it.
I'm speaking of like absentee ballots in the jails. Since they can't come out and vote, but we can certainly get absentee ballots.
Any kind of initiatives.
Yeah.
And I'll check with my organization. I'm sure Louisa can check with the League of Women Voters just to see if that's part of the component. I know that my sorority has been actively trying to just get people to the DMVs to get the required IDs to be able to vote. That's been one component of the voting initiatives that we've kind of doing this, but I'll definitely look at that because that's very crucial.
Yeah, and I would say I know that's something when me and you is on the state level, I'll reach out to being the Board of Elections Director, see if that's something they can do. They do it in the county. So I mean, that's really not a city thing. Well, it is, the Board of Elections is under city, but that could just be an easy phone call to Ben Burkmeyer, the director, to see if that's, well, like you say, these people aren't convicted yet. They're just sitting there, what does that look like for them to be able to actually vote for these up-and-coming elections?
So this has been a very informative, as I knew it would be, and we hope that you all understand not just what the contradictions are, but what our responsibility is. Because what I know is that the more we know we have to do. And I think that's the point that both Reverend Gray has said, Rasheen has said, and Ruby Bonner, is that getting in there like, oh, now we know this. Now we have to do this. And sometimes that's what people don't want you to know. CAPCAR, nor the Organization for Black Struggle, we are not under any confidentiality. We sign nothing. So we're going to talk, okay? So when people tell us what's going on there, we're going to talk. We're going to tell it. So this goes back to what you said, Ruby, about being the voice of the voiceless and of the powerless. And we know that, for example, the health services that they had contracted basically was doing no screening. Rasheen, everybody came in, even if they said, I have a mental health issue, or they still got put in with everybody else with no discretion. I mean, I could do that. I mean, really? So when I hear that something is going on, it's no wonder, because if I tell you I'm schizophrenic and I have paranoid delusion, then you may want to put me somewhere where I'm going to be under some kind of watch. That apparently is not happening. So once we found that out, we began to say, what's up with this health people? Now, you should know that, the administration did get rid of them, and probably, I think the last time I heard, was suing them, and there's a new interim contract. But again, we wouldn't know these things unless we get in there and unless people talk to us. So we want to make ourselves as accessible to our citizens and our people as possible. So 3 things that we obviously need you all to do going forward. You need to get involved with one of these boards. And there's 3 of them that we named: COB, the BFOB, and the city charter. One of the things that CAPCAR really has been responsible for, making sure that people know the process of being recruited, is helping to publicize that. But right now, we don't even know what that is, Rasheen. So are we starting to recruit now? Can we recruit people? Can we tell them there's open positions? What can we tell them? And then the 3rd thing is, we really want you to join CAPCAR to be a part of the ongoing work around the issues of police accountability, court accountability. And if you didn't mark that on your attendance card, you can go back to Janie and announce that. And after Rasheen does it, we're going to have announcements, and then we'll formally close out.
Yes, so as Alderwoman Clark was shaking her head, yes, people can apply on the City of St. Louis. We have plenty of boards and commissions, and COB is 1, DFOB is 3 open positions. I know Keith, I don't know if he's still here, he had mentioned expired terms. To be clear, a person can still serve on expired terms, so just because the term is expired don't mean that they cannot serve. The ideal is to be able to, in the expired term, appoint somebody to it, but at the same time, only way we get people on these boards is if they do apply. So I know that's going to be something when the board goes out Friday. When we come back in January, we're going to be looking to figure out how do we fill these positions on some of these boards, but ultimately we need people to apply for them.
Thank you for that, and definitely CAPCAR will be letting people know when they're open and what the process is. But we thank you for coming out tonight. We thank our viewing audience for joining us, and we hope that you got a lot out of it. Not just enough for it to say I know, but to say I'm moving on what I heard. Lastly, I'm just going to say I think there's still refreshments around the corner if folks are so inclined, but thank you for coming out and be safe, and we'll see you next year.